All right, all right, all right. This is Disrupt Pensacola, everybody, with Bantu Cola, and I have Mr. Derrick Scott online. And he is really important to the community right now. No one knows this, but he is really doing the background of fighting for what's right for us as a community for the political parties. So I wanted to get him online and ask some really important questions and have him go into what he's doing and how everything is affecting us so that everyone understands why what's happening right now in the state of Florida is going to make changes that we may not be comfortable with later on down the road. We don't feel them now, but we're going to definitely feel them later. So it's really important that we have this discussion so that we can let people know what's happening and you know what to do when it comes to voting in the upcoming months. So, all right. So welcome, welcome, welcome. It is good to see you, Derrick. It's been a while since I've seen you in person.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So talk to me about, let's talk about what happened on Saturday. Just curious as to what went on.
Yep. So Saturday, we had a joint event. It was a nonpartisan event. It's sponsored by the Northwest Florida Panhandle Coalition for Civic Engagement. They did a 2023 legislative session debrief with Equal Ground. Now, when you hear it, it may sound like, oh, okay, legislative session debrief. That doesn't sound sexy. That doesn't sound like a way that I want to spend my Saturday morning. Yeah. But when I tell you it was the most informative thing, because what took place that Saturday is Equal Ground came in and they broke down a lot of the recent laws that have been implemented as of July 1st that affect all Floridians, but particularly affect marginalized communities. So Black, Brown, LGBTQ, and women as well. The things that have impacted us are of great magnitude. And the thing about it is that most people if you're just, going about living your everyday life, going to work, trying to make ends meet, providing for your families, you don't know because they're not telling you what they passed and how it impacts us, particularly in the marginalized areas, and how it's going to be detrimental for us. So we invited a group, Equal Ground, to come out and share that. And that's what they did. Effective, I will say, starting July 1st, the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis passed about 200 laws that went into effect. In those 200 laws, some of them are good, but the majority of the 200 are bad. Incredibly bad.
Okay, so give me an example of what some of the laws that are good first. Let's start with that to see what some of the things that they said that were positive.
So they did one. I'll stick the one that I highlight here is, and I don't remember the bill number, but it centered around unmarked African American grave sites. What's happening right now in the state of Florida? Development and housing industry is booming. People are building new construction left and right. And what's happening is they're building properties or developments over unmarked grave sites, particularly grave sites that are that house the remains of people who look like you, people who look like me. And they have been, particularly in Central and South Florida, they've had to go in, they've used satellite imagery, looking at after the fact, rather, and then this is after an entire complex or apartment building has been built. They'll use satellite imagery only to discover that the ground that the development has been placed upon is sacred because it has, it's unmarked graves. So they've had to go in, displace residents who had already moved in and have established a life in those communities, tear down the buildings, and then either relocate the grave sites or find a new place to put said development, which again is at great cost. So, what they've done is they've gone through an earmarked fund so that we can do surveys and determine where those grave sites are to prevent this from happening, in the future. Because it's not a one-off. When I tell you it's in Central and South Florida, I won't say that it's not happening here, but we haven't heard of it to the level that they've had it in Central and South Florida. It's an ongoing thing. It's a problem. So, that's one of the good things that I'd say that came out of this legislative session that we've had in 2023. But again, that's only one thing. We got 199 other things that were like horrible. But that was the one thing that came out of it. So.
Okay, and that's something that we definitely need to have, because like I honestly feel that we're being erased in the state of Florida completely with some of the things that have been said. And there's only a few things that can be said on the news because of it being owned by so many other different people that don't want the real information to come out. Right. But we're going to tell what we need to tell here so that people can know what's going on. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that are happening that's affecting us here locally that we need to be thinking about. What's going on?
So I'll start with, and these aren't in order of magnitude. If I look at them, these are the things I'll highlight 4 things that affect us the most, the biggest, and we'll talk about those. So we'll talk about, the first thing is Senate Bill 7050, which was signed into law and it's effective July 1st. And that may not mean anything for you, but this is the elections law. This is what right now our current sitting governor is in a bid to run for the presidency of the United States.
Right.
Typically, what should happen is that when you're in a public office, you hold a public office and you seek another office that's higher than the office that you hold, the law states that you have to resign your office to seek to run for that office. To give you an example, we saw this last year with 2 candidates. We saw it with Val Demings, who was a sitting congresswoman, and when she ran for Senate, U.S. Senate against Marco Rubio, she resigned her congressional seat in Orlando. The second example of that is Charlie Crist. Charlie Crist was a sitting congressman out of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County. He resigned his seat to run for the governorship. In theory, now that Ron DeSantis has decided to put in his bid for the presidency, he should have resigned his position as governor of the state of Florida. He passed a law that allows him to continue to.
I was wondering about that. Okay, so he got it set up so that if he loses, he still has his job.
He still has his job.
So crazy. Okay.
And at the expense currently, because he is everywhere other than the state of Florida right now, trying to run for or establish his bid for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States. So he can do that and give a flying flip about what's going on in the state of Florida, because he's out in Maine, he's out in Pennsylvania, he's in Connecticut, he's everywhere other than the state of Florida governing Floridians, so he can do that. And that's because we have a Republican supermajority in the state legislature. And by Republican supermajority, that means that more than 85% of your elected state representatives and state senators are from one party, and that's the Republican Party.
Okay.
That may not mean anything. One could say, well, that's just politics. Sometimes it's one group, sometimes it's another. But what this does do for you is that it means they can run any type of legislation. If they want to say, in the state of Florida, Black people will now be purple, they can make that into law without any knowledge. They don't have to have any public hearings. They can do everything expeditiously without any public input. And again, it can pass because they've got both chambers in the House as well as the Senate to pass these laws. So this is what has allowed them to do what they're needing to do. But how it affects our community, aside from Senate Bill 7050, and that's just one piece of it. What it has done is it has restricted third-party voter registration organizations from being able to register voters the way that we typically have. So if you think about voter registration, or you've been around, people in the old world, people would say, someone would come up to you and say, "Hey, Catrice, are you registered to vote?" And hypothetically, you would say no. They would say, "Would you like to register to vote?" They would give you the voter registration form. You'd fill it out. They'd take it back from you, and they'd send it to the supervisor of elections office. We no longer have that ability to do that. We can't, third-party voter registration organizations can't handle people's personal information now, which means that I can't give you a form and collect it from you to give to the Secretary of State or the supervisor of elections office. We can't do any paper registration. Now, I want to be clear. This does not mean that people cannot register to vote in the state of Florida. That's not what we're saying.
Right.
But what we're saying is that they've made it incredibly difficult to register voters. The way this impacts people who look like you and people who look like me is because Black and brown communities are 5 times more likely to rely on the aid of third-party voter registration organizations to register their communities to vote. So this means like NAACP, who does voter registration. This means like the Florida Democratic Party. This means the League of Women Voters. Any of these organizations that you see that have done voter registration in the past, they can no longer do so.
So let me ask you a question, because with that being said, I know that when I got my driver's license, that I was able to register to vote at that particular time. Right. Why is it that the Black community does not consider doing it when they get their driver's license?
So they can, and that's what I want to say. There are still options that are available for people to register to vote. So you can do it at the DMV. When you go do any change or update at the Department of Motor Vehicles or the tax collector's office, they'll say, "Do you need to make updates to your driver's license or register to vote?" Yada yada yada. You can do all that still. I don't know why people don't do it. Still, I think younger generations pre-register to vote when they get their license, if they so choose. But, think about it. For those of us who have some age behind under our belt, we don't typically go to the DMV for, typical things. So if you aren't registered to vote, that's not typically a stop that you would make, to go and do so. So I think you will see an uptick in younger folks registering to vote through the DMV. You can still do so. You can still go to the supervisor of elections. But think about this: for people who don't have transportation or don't have access to these, to technology to register to vote online, they can no longer, we can no longer service those communities. So think about your rural marginalized who, don't necessarily have the means and transportation to do so. This makes it difficult to do that for them. They also passed, we have, what we've seen in the past historically is a shift from people going in on election day to vote, to now using either early voting or vote by mail, right? And vote by mail is becoming increasingly popular as a way to, make your voice heard. That bill, Senate Bill 7050, put restrictions on even vote by mail process. They shortened the length of time that you had to request a vote by mail ballot from 12 days to 10 days. If you're in a household or live in a residence where more than one person is registered to vote and has an ability to vote by mail, you typically could have sent, like, let's say you and I were in a household and we both wanted to send our vote by mail ballots back in. I could put them in one envelope and send them in. Now that's illegal. You have to have a vote by mail envelope. I have to have a vote by mail envelope, and it can't go in the same. Or if you send it in that way, they immediately discard and throw away your vote, your ballot.
Wow.
Right. So this is a way to disenfranchise people. Now think back when we were in 2016, and the state of Florida was touted, and even 2018, everybody talked about the security, how secure the electoral process was in the state of Florida. Right. We had no issues. Suddenly, once we had a change in administration, so when we went from Donald Trump to Joe Biden, all of a sudden there's all this massive election fraud, or there are allegations of election fraud.
Okay.
And I want people to know that in no case here in our area or in the state of Florida did we have election fraud. This is a lie that's continuously being perpetuated. You're not to believe it, but they have used this as the base of what they're doing now to say, oh, we need to make this election secure. They have targeted vote by mail because this method of voting has become increasingly more popular for communities of color. So Black people are voting by mail. They're straying away from election day votes and going more to early voting and vote by mail, which is detrimental to the other party, Republicans, because you understand how you fall based on, if you see early voting results and vote by mail, they can figure out they can do a rallying call to figure out how many people they need to get out for election day voting. So they're trying to limit the amount of people that they need to do this, because again, it is becoming increasingly more important to vote and cast your ballot. So if we can limit and curtail the amount of people who cast their votes, that's what we're doing. That's what we call voter suppression, right? They've also, if you are registered, and this is something that I want to get out to people, if you are registered in any fashion for vote by mail in the past, they now have passed a law that after every election cycle, that vote by mail registration has expired. So people who have been registered for years for vote by mail are no longer eligible. Here in Escambia County, we had about 20,000 people who were on the rolls for vote by mail. At the end of 2022, that registration has expired, and so you have to now re-enroll. Senate Bill 7050 has made it difficult for us to do that because we can't take the vote by mail ballots and give to people, vote by mail forms to give to people and get them back to take them to the SOE's office. So it's a conundrum. We've had to reimagine how we do register voters and do vote by mail. So now, I'll tell people, if you are in the Escambia, Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Walton area, and you may have received a letter or a postcard from your supervisor of elections saying that you need to re-register, answer that message. Do so. Right now, we still have to cover that ground. So we had 20,000. We don't nearly have any of that right now. I think we have about 3,000 of the 20 that were registered initially. Have to be re-registered. So, vote by mail, for one of the things that I get all the time is I don't want to vote by mail. I want to go in and cast my ballot. Vote by mail registration doesn't mean you have to vote by mail. It just gives you another option. I always like to say it's your plan A. Voting in person should be your plan B. But, so you want to make sure you get that. Plus, it allows you to see the ballot ahead of time so that you can study. If you're not as well versed on what the issues are, you have enough time to take a look before you go in and cast your vote the day of. So that's some of the things that we're doing.
Okay, let me ask a question, because this was a few years ago. They had set it up where a lot of the felony people that had gone to jail, and they paid their debt to society, and they were able to literally go back and vote. What has happened to that situation? Because I know it was a big uproar.
Yeah, so you're right. With Amendment 4 a few years ago, the state of Florida, and by the state of Florida, I mean Floridians who cast their vote, said that returning citizens, as they're called, who have paid their debts to society, should be afforded the right for representation and a right to cast their ballot. So we did a referendum, which was commonly known as Amendment 4, and that actually passed. The legislature, in their infinite wisdom, decided, nope, we don't want you to pass. So we don't want you to vote. So we're going to make it increasingly difficult for you to do that. And in order to successfully get your rights restored as a citizen, you have to pay your fines and your fees that you may have owed at the time of your conviction, right? Which, you know, on face, that sounds like, okay, that's not
super easy. Yeah.
that's super easy, right? In the state of Florida, there's no database or repository of information that tells you what those fines and fees are. So you have to, most counties, there's 67 counties, most of our counties don't know what those fines and fees or assessments are that a returning citizen owes. So it's hard to, you know, make that payment and get that on. Sometimes it could be just a couple $100. A lot of times it's in the thousands. Now think about, you know, a returning citizen who has just been incarcerated for a period of time. What money do they have to be able to afford their fines and fees to pay them back so that they can have their rights and their rights restored? They don't have the funds, and more often than not, it's you won't be able to get the job that you need to get to afford the to have the income or the disposable income to pay those fines and fees. So you're stuck in a cycle there. This is a modern day poll tax. If you think about the way Black folks were, how the stuff that they had to go through to count the jelly beans in the jar. This is just a modern day poll tax for, again, people of color. Now, when we talk about in the state of Florida, what does that look like? That's 1.5 million Black and brown people who could have the right to vote that are being denied the right to vote. So right now you have to pay your fines and fees. But again, now there's an organization called the Florida Rights and Restoration Coalition, FRRC, who is out there assisting people on how to get their fines paid. There's grant money to help with that, so you can do so. But again, I'm going to move us back into current day. 7050 also prevents anyone that has a felony conviction, irrespective of whether or not you've gotten your rights restored, to be able to have any part in voter registration. So what that means is that the people who are helping, a number of the people who are assisting returning citizens getting their rights restored can no longer help them because they themselves are also returning citizens. So, and people who, you know, in the past, anybody could help register to vote. You could be a returning citizen, you could be an immigrant or someone who is not a U.S. citizen. They've also taken them out of the equation. So if you have a felony conviction or you're not a U.S. citizen, you cannot assist people with voter registration. So again, this is the way what they're doing to hinder you from being able to cast your ballot or things of that nature. So this is why, you know, we need to stay mindful, you know. And again, and I'll just be honest, you would think that this applies, 7050 applies to everybody, but DeSantis has the election police that is currently out to do, it's like his henchmen who are targeting these folks, and they don't have their specific only purpose. They only report to Governor DeSantis, and their sole purpose is to target people who are who have felony convictions, or target people who are registering voters so they know who to slow down. Right now in the state of Florida, there is a 500,000 registered voter gap between Republicans and Democrats. So if you added, returning citizens, more than likely they would register Democrats. So we got to keep that. Their intent is to keep that from happening. So they're doing everything that they can to prevent this stuff. So, and this is why it's important for us to go out and vote. You know.
Okay. So let's switch gears. I'm gonna stop for just a second because you've given me so much, and my brain is like, oh my God, this is a lot. But let's switch gears and let's talk about like what's going on. You mentioned earlier something going on with the school system. Tell us what's going on with that part of it.
So HB1, again, effective July, Governor DeSantis signed into law HB1, which is school choice, which allows every eligible child in the state of Florida to receive a voucher that can be applied towards a private or charter school education, right?
Mhm.
Now, in the past, if you think about charters, you think, okay, well, that, vouchers are new. That's not anything new. We've always had vouchers. So why is that critical? This, again, if you remember, to be eligible for a voucher in the past, you had to attend a failing school, right?
Okay.
This now voucher program is available for every child in the state of Florida to attend a private or charter school, irrespective of school performance. What this means is that, again, if we want to have your child, some people may think, oh, this is good. I want my child to have a private school education, or I want my child to have a specialized education. I'm going to send them to charter or private. The money that is assigned for a student is called FTE dollars. That's the money that is allocated in the public education system for each child to attend school. That money follows that child out of public school. So if you decide to take your child out of public school and send them to, Tom Jones, charter or Tom Jones private school, you can do so and they take your money. Now, remember, the thing about private and charter is that they don't have to keep your child, nor do they have to take, your child. Or for whatever reason, let's just say for whatever reason, that charter school or private school experience doesn't work out for your child. They've already taken the $9,000 voucher from you for your child to go to school, but they don't give that money back. So you send your child back to public school. The money that's allocated for your child stays at Tom Jones private or Tom Jones charter school. They don't give that money back. So the money follows your child out. It does not follow it back. So so what that means is that this essentially, based on the studies, is going to take out of the state of Florida public education system, it's going to take out $4 billion, not million, but billions with the B, out of the public education school system, right? So this is simply a way, when you look at it, and that's going to result in overcrowded classrooms, right? Mm-hmm. Textbooks and resources that are dedicated for instruction are not going to be there. There's going to be an increased shortage of teachers because districts aren't going to be able to afford to send them. So you might think you're getting a benefit in the short term, but you're putting the rest of the community in a very precarious situation, because those who choose to have their children publicly educated are going to face the repercussions of that decision.
I have a question. Let me ask this question. I'm sorry for cutting you off. What happens if a person is homeschooling? Where does that money go?
If you're homeschooling, that voucher then goes to the homeschool. So you still, that same voucher you can use for private, private charter and homeschool. So you can use it, but again, once it goes out, it's out. It doesn't come back. So if you decide for whatever reason that either one of those three experiences are not the best, for your child, you send your child back to an underfunded public school system.
So you can homeschool your child. They'll give you the funds. Who do they give the funds to for the homeschooling?
I think they go directly to the parent. I'm not sure exactly how that works for them, but
okay. If they give the funds to the parent, and then the parent decides that they don't want to homeschool their child anymore, they get to keep that money basically, and then they can put their child in public school or wherever, and it doesn't matter.
Right. That is correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So I want to say that in other states who have tried this, they have bankrupted the public education system. So there's a potential for public education to be disseminated. But again, that is the intent of the bill. It is to give the rich a credit or a break on their tuition expense. This is not to help people who look like you, are brown, and brothers and sisters, to help them. This is only so that the rich don't have to pay $20,000. They can now pay $11,000. Wow. That is only what this is for. So please understand the intent of this. And they may, try to put it in a favorable light, but this is really what this is. This is the intent of this is.
Whew, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the educational portion a little bit more. So they just changed they're trying to, I don't know if they've already passed it or not, but they're talking about how Black people have benefited from slavery. Yep. Is that already a law that's been put in place? Is it already moving forward? What's going on with that?
Yeah, so just a few weeks ago, I think it was maybe 3 weeks, the Florida Board of Education unanimously passed the new standards for the state of Florida for social studies. And in that social studies curriculum, it states, as you just mentioned, that Black people had a benefit. There was a benefit for slavery. They've also included in that, they cite 16 examples of Black people who have received a benefit from being slaves. Now, of those 16, 10 of them weren't even slaves. They were born freemen. So, when you look at it, that's not here or there. Let's start with the simple premise that there was no way, shape, form, or fashion at the dismantling of Black families who came from Africa to be separated, to be raped, to be forced into labor, to be enslaved. There is absolutely no benefit for that. They try to say, oh, well, you learned skills like some people parlayed them into being blacksmiths and master contractors. That's why we have so many people of color in construction and things like that. This is when white supremacy has gotten a stronghold on the way people think. Because to be clear, Black people were all those things in Africa. We built pyramids to which people are still trying to figure out how we did. We did so successfully. So there's not a skill that was developed. You took us from our native land. You forced us into a religion that you wanted us to have. You raped Black women. You separated Black families, but yet there's a benefit. So let's be clear, but let's talk about that. So that is in the social studies curriculum. Right now, they passed that too late in the year to affect the social studies curriculum that's currently in. So your textbooks will remain your textbooks this year. Now, when we go into the next year, the 2024-2025 school term, that's going to be a different story. That's when you'll start seeing this. But they already have manipulatives that are being used and utilized in certain districts. The source is called PragerU, and it's a source by a man, the most devout racist that you probably know in modern day. His name is Dennis Prager. And in this, they talk about the anti-woke agenda. They talk about, pulling the segments are like Black people pulling the race card. Is it real or not real? They talk about this stuff, and they're going to be teaching this to children. And this is why it's detrimental. We put these people in place, and you would say, why is it that they can do this? Again, they can do this because they have a supermajority, and that supermajority put people on the Board of Education that think like them, that go along with them, and to make these decisions for us. I have said time and time again, and people think I'm being hyperbolic when I say it, but I'm really not. We're 2 election cycles away from being back into slavery. Let's be clear about that. And so if we don't get out to vote, we will find ourselves in a very precarious and horrible situation. And so we're trying to.
How can we fight? How can we fight against like the social studies and the educational thing? Is there something that we can do right now to start trying to help make that change where it goes back?
So the very first thing is you need to start attending your school board meetings. Right now, here in Escambia County, the school board meets the third Tuesday of every month at 5 o'clock, I believe it is, at the Hall Center, the JE Hall Center. I don't know when they meet in other counties, but you would have to contact or find out when that is. You're going to need to go to your school board and actually speak publicly against this. Now, what we have found, particularly if you've been following some of the work that the Escambia Democratic Party has been doing and others around the town, of course, including across the nation, there's been an assault on the banning of books that reflect images that look like you, that look like myself, limit images that represent LGBTQ communities, or anything that has intersectionality in it. They try to slowly pick off. Now, once we come together and we voice our displeasure, you've seen some movement where things that have been on the chopping block have suddenly found themselves off the chopping block. But again, that's only going to be if we get involved and have our voice shared at these school board meetings. So when we have, everybody, I'll tell you, they're going to be doing a school board meeting here in Escambia County in September, and they're going to be looking at trying to set up community guidelines. Every person in Escambia County who has a student who looks like you, who looks like me, who are brown, any other person of color, needs to be at that school board meeting. They need to make their voice heard and tell them what we will and will not stand for. That's the immediate thing. There are some letters going around that, the Republican strategy has been to opt out, send letters for the parents to send letters to opt them out of being able to have access. We need to use that same strategy against them as well. So if you're enrolled in a school where they are teaching or utilizing PragerU manipulatives in the future, you need to write a letter to your principal or your administrator or your school district saying that I want to opt my child out of that experience, because it is not it's not accurate. It doesn't reflect true history, right? So we need to do that. But in the long term, what we need to do is prepare ourselves and get educated to understand what the issues are, and not just believe what people tell you. Don't believe what I'm telling you. Do the research yourself, and you'll find that what I'm telling you is fact-based, and it aligns with what is going on. Do the research yourself, and when we get to 2024, participate in the electoral process. That is going to be key, because that's why we're in the position that we're in now.
Okay, that's a lot of good information. Let me switch gears to one other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and then after that I'll let you go. But we're going to have a lot more discussion, definitely, about some of the things that's going on, because it's really important that we as a people understand what is happening to us. We don't know about, and that's the problem. Sometimes we allow stuff to happen because it's being done behind the scenes or in silence, and we have to make sure that we are abreast of what's happening so that we can know what to fight and know who to fight and why we're fighting. So those are the things that I want to make sure that we keep front, for sure. Thank you again for coming on. Let me just say this one other thing, and then after that, I'm gonna disperse. In talking with you earlier, we also discussed the immigration law that's been kicked in, and that is something that when you explained to me what was going on, I was like, I've got to get this on tape. So let's talk about what that's all about.
Yeah. So recently there was a bill, Senate Bill 1718, again, July 1st, one of those many 200 that we talk about, that is an immigration law. What it has done is it has allowed several things. If you've been to any of your doctor's appointments lately, the first thing that the intake folks at the front desk will ask, when filling out your paperwork, they'll say, are you a U.S. citizen? That's a question that's never been asked before. But here in the state of Florida, when you seek medical care now, that's going to be a question that they ask. A lot of people who look like you and look like me are like, why are they asking this question? Well, they've asked it because of Senate Bill 1718. That is now something that they are required to know, because again, if you're not a U.S. citizen, they're going to start reporting this information. When we look at, it's also We'll talk about your experience as a driver, just little things. Right now, I have a driver's license. Many of us have a driver's license. When you have passengers in the car, I don't know anybody who has ever asked someone, are they a U.S. citizen before they get into their car, right? Right now, Senate Bill 1718 has designed it so, and I'll give you an example. If you are driving with someone and you get stopped by a police officer for speeding or whatever the infraction may have been, the officer is not required to, but can ask if you're a U.S. citizen. You may say yes. If your passenger says no, and the officer follows up with, well, can you produce your paperwork, and they aren't able to, they're going to be put in to a detention facility for people who are supposedly here illegally. And you, as a driver, are going to jail immediately. You're going to be charged with a felony just because you have someone in your car who is, undocumented. That doesn't mean that you broke any traffic infraction or any of that stuff. You think about the police. Police can pull you over for anything. They can say your light is out, whatever the case may be. They can target you for this stuff. Now they have a reason to stop and inquire and ask you questions. So these are the things that you have to know about. If you're driving, if you have like a driver's license, and I won't quote the states, but there are 5 states, particularly Hawaii, and then the bulk of the rest of them are in the Northeast. If you have a driver's license from those states, I know Connecticut is one, Hawaii is one, Rhode Island, I think, is another.
These are all sanctuary states, is that correct?
They're all sanctuary states, right? Those, or states that have sanctuary cities. Though the state of Florida is not recognizing those driver's licenses for those states, even though they are legitimately driver's license. Any place else in the world, in the United States, will take those driver's licenses, but in Florida, you can't have them. Why? Because they're sanctuary cities, and according to the state legislator, that invalidates your driver's license. Their ability to drive here in the state of Florida, which is going to affect tourism. It affects people in the military who have, driver's license from those states. It can affect a myriad of folks. So, and then just look at construction. They're building houses left and right, but if you notice, there's been a slowdown of those. Those because the skilled labor that is usually on these job sites are those who are immigrants or skilled at that labor for whatever reason. You don't see those houses. That construction is slowly going down. We live in the state of Florida. Right now, we're in hurricane season. God forbid, if something happens, we get hit by a hurricane or any other natural disaster, and you need to have your roof repaired. If you were here in Sally, it took me 2 years to finally get my roof done after Hurricane Sally in 2020, and come until December 2022. It took that long. You're going to be in a very precarious situation with any home repair or anything that you need as a result of any of the storms. So these are the things that are going on, that you need to know about. Yeah. And I know you said you wanted to go, but I also just want to cover one thing really quickly, and that's that's the one thing, and that's permitless carry. Permitless carry, they talked about everybody now you don't have to have a permit to do concealed carry, right? Doesn't mean open carry, but anybody can have a gun. And some people are like, oh, this is a good thing. We need to be able to protect ourselves. What you need to now understand is that law enforcement in the state of Florida are now operating under the assumption that every person of color has a gun. So what is that going to mean? That is going to mean, we think about Fernando Castillo. We think of all these people who have been innocently murdered by the police. That rate is going to go up. So, you've now got to be an extra special if you look like me in police and traffic stop interactions, because now the working assumption is that you have a gun. And let's be clear, that's not necessarily different from what it was before. But it's going to be a lot higher. It's the law now, so they can operate under that premise.
So, in other words, they can pretend like even if they know that the person is not dangerous, they can pretend like their lives are in danger and just shoot somebody. And the thing is that we don't. I know that there's a lot of shooting that takes place in the Black community, but most of us don't even carry guns. Like I don't think I would ever have a gun in my lifetime. But
Yep.
I know. But now with that being the case, I mean, I don't have to have a gun. All I have to do is be Black and driving or going someplace, and they think that I'm dangerous and just decide to shoot me.
That's exactly
very
what
scary.
it is. That's exactly what it is. So, even if to your point, I don't own a gun either, but where I'm now, you have to operate they're now operating on the premise that I have a gun. So they're going to treat me as such, And so this is why you think, oh, okay, well, this is good. We can carry, we don't have to have a gun. But again, you have people who now have guns who shouldn't have guns, and being able to, have them. So this is going to create a nightmare. We may not see it now, but, the very first unarmed Black shooting that you see in the state of Florida, again, you're going to want, well, how did this take place? It took place legally. It took place legally because they passed the law. They passed the law because they had them supermajority. We had them a supermajority because we did not vote.
Wow.
Yeah. These are the things. So, and we just covered 4. There are 95 others that I could tell you about that are like crazy, but again, they all say the same thing, and that is.
But we're gonna go through more of them. This is just this is a lot of information, and I want to get it out there. But we're gonna talk about the rest of them as well. So be prepared for our next meeting for us to have this discussion.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate this. We will definitely be talking more, and I'm so sorry I'm having a fit right now. But I'm looking forward to definitely having that discussion with you in the future.
Sounds good. Everybody take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.